Hello, I'm Paula Cunningham, State Director for AARP Michigan. Thank you for being with us today. We're going to be talking about caring for the caregivers, a topic that everyone has someone or knows someone who is or soon will be perhaps a caregiver. And that is a topic that has resonated throughout all of AARP community, outside of our community, everywhere. And it's what are the resources, what are the tools that we can provide to caregivers to help them care for their loved ones. There are 1.7 million of them throughout the entire state of Michigan, and we want to make certain that they get the resources and the tools that they need. So to do that, we have an esteemed panel of people with us today. We have the Universal Dementia Caregiver representative with us. We have the University of Michigan, and also in the house together at the same time, U of M and MSU, Michigan State University representative, all talking about caregivers. And to lead that discussion, we have someone who herself is a caregiver. She has cared for her mother for a number of years. She was the former associate dean of the College of Education at Michigan State University. Go Green. All right. And also, she was the first African-American woman in the country to hold that position. She is sharp. She is bright. And she's been facilitating this series for us, for My Sisters and Friends. It's an entire series that we're having throughout the month of March, Women's History Month, and she has been facilitating this series for us. Dr. Sonya Gunnings-Moton is also the mother of an NFL offensive linebacker. She's a caregiver. She's brilliant. She was the owner of a private practice in clinical psychology, and she is known throughout the entire country in her consulting work and the work that she has done, not only in education, but in a variety of other areas, such as DEI work, as well as urban education, as well as making certain that corporate America knows exactly what's needed in education and other places. So she is a powerhouse all into herself, and someone who will lead this discussion and facilitate this series for us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Gunnings. We appreciate you being here. And for those of you who have just signed in, phone someone, connect with someone, and tell them to join this session. Hopefully there's news that you can use on this, My Sisters and Friends, Caring for the Caregiver. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Paula, and welcome everyone. I am happy to be here again this week. As Paula mentioned, this series focuses on wealth, health, and self. And today we have three wonderful presenters who will share their knowledge with you about caregiving, including how to access resources on navigating medical care for a loved one, palliative care, respite care, even technology that can help caregivers and more. This is a session in which we know people have personal stories that resonate with them as a caregiver. And in full transparency, on my part as your facilitator, and Paula alluded to this, it's important to share that this particular session is deeply personal for me, as I am sure it is for all of you that are participating today. I, with the unwavering support of my husband, have been a caregiver to my mother, who has lived with us for the past 8 years. 30 days to the day after the unexpected passing of my father, my mother, an extremely active woman who was actually managing our family business at the time, experienced her first of what would be 2 strokes, which I consider grief-triggered strokes, and followed by increasing dementia, all of which sort of thrust us into what people refer to as this new normal, a new normal that I, quite frankly, as a psychologist, I was not prepared for. And I honestly don't know if you can ever really be prepared for a life change in reality of that kind of magnitude. And I also know that many of you who are participating today can relate when I say that the stress, the anxiety, the depression, the fatigue, and the guilt about feeling all of that, and the other health effects that I experienced were and still are at times, if I'm honest, feel overwhelming. But I want you to know that the real reason that I agreed to facilitate this series is because I am grateful to my friend, AARP, Michigan AARP State Director Paula Cunningham, who through all of that saw a change in me. And I want to seize this opportunity to thank Paula publicly. She would not allow me to withdraw and believe that being strong, and yes, I am one of those women who is of the opinion that appearing strong is so important. But she would not let me believe that that meant I didn't need help. And she let me know that there was, in fact, help and resources available, and let me know that I was not alone. And that was important to hear. I was actually quite blown away to learn that there are 38 million unpaid caregivers in our country, with, as you heard Paula reference earlier, with over 1.7 million in Michigan alone. And that our caregiving equates to over $600 billion of unpaid support to our loved ones. $600 billion of unpaid support. All of that makes me think of the African proverb, it takes a village. Because there is no doubt in my mind that the role of caregiver is necessarily about a village. A little over a week ago, our village celebrated my mother's 85th birthday. She did not know it was her birthday, but she did know we were celebrating her. And I'm smiling because it felt good knowing that my efforts and commitment to her were a large part of the reason we were able to celebrate her life. And I hope that at some point today, while we are addressing the challenges, that we also get an opportunity to acknowledge what it is that some of us have found actually quite rewarding about being in this caretaker role. I've learned that my story is not unusual. It is uniquely mine, but it is not unlike many of the stories that you have and will hear today. So I invite you to also be part of this conversation. If you have any questions that you want to ask, please put it in the chat. Please put your questions in the chat. And in keeping with our village, if you have found any particular resource especially helpful for you in your role and circumstances, please put that in the chat as well. Our presenters are tremendously knowledgeable individuals, but they are not the only source of knowledge among us today. So let's try to tap into all of that as we move forward and have this discussion about caring for the caregiver. We will make time following their presentations to get to as many of your questions and statements about caregiver support as possible. And so now let me move along, and I'm going to introduce our three presenters in the order that they will be presenting. Laura Rice-Eschker is the director of the University of Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Center Wellness Initiative, where she designs, implements, and evaluates well-being and self-care programming for family caregivers. Dr. Paula Duren is the founder of Universal Dementia Caregivers. After years of caring for both of her parents as they steadily declined in memory and awareness, Paula discovered techniques for addressing the emotional well-being of caregivers and patients. And Dr. Fei Sun. Dr. Sun is a professor of health and aging policy fellow at the Michigan State University School of Social Work. His research interests primarily focus on seeking psychosocial interventions to minimize the impact of Alzheimer's diseases on elders, family caregivers, and communities. So join me in welcoming our presenters. I thank all of you for being here today. And I think we're going to get started with you, Laura.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gunnings-Moton, and the fine work of the Michigan AARP and Drs. Duren and Dr. Sun. I work in a research center and surrounded by scientists who are working towards management and the cure of many different dementias. And just as research and education go hand in hand, so is the work of advocacy and policies to improve the lives of caregivers, and how this goes hand in hand with learning how to care for ourselves individually and in community and caregiving. So if you're a family caregiver, Thank you for being here. We're so glad you're here to take care of yourself. And if you're a professional, thank you. We need as many people as possible showing up to these conversations and to the guts it takes to turn towards our healing opportunities and living while providing care for others. So, how to be okay when others are not okay. And in this way, care partnering becomes a way of living. And so, we're challenged to live our part, to grow into the full catastrophe, as we call it in mindfulness and compassion work. So, a bit about the intro here. My clinical work aside, I'm really here today for two reasons. Because of the generosity and mentoring I've received, as many of you have perhaps as well. 28 years now of learning from adults facing chronic and terminal illness and their care partners. And as Dr. Gunning was sharing, I was also raised in a caregiving family. My grandmother had dementia. My mother was a caregiver for both her parents in her 30s in the 1980s, and she didn't have what she needed. She didn't have what she needed to be okay, to feel resourced, to feel supported internally and externally, and it wasn't her fault. And she suffered greatly. And in many ways, she's still healing as she's entering her own vulnerabilities now as an elder, another opportunity. And as I turn 50 this coming week, I know we're going to be okay now. And thankfully, a very different story for my family. And I hope for all of you as well. So there are healthy ways to move through caregiving without losing yourself. And it's possible. So slowing down is actually my forte in conversations with self-care, but we don't have time for that today. The good news is it's going to be recorded. So we'll make the most of the time we have here together. And rather than an elevator speech, I'm prepared more for elevator encouragement. And the encouragement, hopefully, you'll provide each other in the chat. This is going to move quickly, but with intention. And from yourself to yourself towards your care, I'll be asking you some questions. So it's how I hope to do this. If you want to move to the intro slide, thank you, Karina, behind the scenes there. I selected 3 life lessons I've learned from family caregivers that have changed my life, the way I work, and how we relate to what we do into care partnering, and to share these with you. So rather than my words today, what you'll walk away with is a sense of your own story and to make it yours, to invite you to take this opportunity to consider where you are right now in your care partnering. And also to take a full breath all the way in and all the way out every time you hear a question today, and as many times as you wish throughout this hour. So if you're ready, here's the first question for you. Please write down 1 to 3 words you feel are essential ingredients to your own self-care. Just right off the top. 1 to 3 words that you feel are essential ingredients for your own self-care. Thank you. And now, if you would please write down 1 or 3 words describing how you feel when your needs are not met. When your needs are not met or ignored or misunderstood, especially by the people who love you. 3 words describe how you feel when your needs are not met, ignored, or misunderstood. Okay, here's the first essential lesson in practice. The ability to prioritize self-care as a practice and revise it regularly as a part of your daily structure and as a habit and a way of being, right? This path through. And this is an act of love. So rather than trying to fix anything, we can get really curious about the obstacles themselves. And the obstacles in our self-care aren't problems, they're road signs. It's how we relate to them and ourselves, and to check in with our attitudes and approach to self-care ongoing, which is to say, the quality of the soil we're growing in. And there's so much control we actually have right here. So here's a self-check-in for you on the next slide. Self-care is not a luxury, nor is it an option. And this reward system approach is really sneaky and corrosive. So just checking in with where you may see this in your own life. Certainly shows up in mine and the way we're often socialized to relate to our self-care. Small, familiar an accessible, regular, brief habit sprinkled throughout the day is far more impactful than intermittent long breaks. And we need the long breaks, but we need the building blocks there. Without them, we become unwell. And how do we know? It's because our emergency response system comes on board. So just checking in when the last time you felt like you were just going sideways, that's an indication that more care is needed. And the pathway there is what we often forget to practice, right? Towards the pleasant and comfortable things, we need to include in self-care how well we tolerate the difficulty and the discomfort of taking up more space, of holding our boundary when maybe other people are uncomfortable and when perhaps they want more of our attention. So it's so challenging with care partners when we're out in front, being vigilant about other people's needs.
You know, Laura, I don't want your point to go without emphasis about the notion of making yourself a priority in your own life. That, I don't know if people truly heard and internalized that, but in my opinion, it's worth bringing that to rise again.
Yes.
Because when you asked us about what are our priorities, and people will often respond to everything but themselves.
That's right.
I just wanted to highlight that point because I think that's a strong takeaway message that I hope that the people who are participating heard.
It's a great point. And often when I start groups and ask people how they're doing, they'll often tell me how their partner's doing. And then we'll begin again. And so that's a natural way to notice how our nervous system is tapped to someone else, and they're not symmetrical experiences. So here's the second practice or essential lesson. And here's your next question. A deep breath, right? It's a lot, particularly if you're caregiving right now. Please write down one quality you wish to have most as a caregiver, what quality you hope to embody and to lead your care partnering. And when you're ready, to consider when you most likely feel patient, present, calm, and clear-headed. When I'm ... When are you most likely to feel patient, present, calm, and clear-headed? Thank you. And you can keep writing and hopefully return to this later. It's a starting point of your own map. So the next slide here is the next lesson. Confidence in our ability to self-regulate and respond to what's happening in the moment. Confidence in the ability to self-regulate and respond to what's happening in the moment. And so a side note here on the next slide about what I mean by self-regulation. And this is the great work out of trauma. And I do consider care partnering a part of trauma work. And the work of looking at the nervous system. So Dan Siegel, you can Google this, but we're looking at the window of tolerance. I just want to mention this on the side so you understand that this is self-regulation, separate from trying to overthink our way through self-care, but really what's happening in our body. In the window of tolerance, we recognize that we're moving from, as Dr. Gunnings was saying, overwhelm, right, to when we're feeling frozen, perhaps numbed and really shut down. And this window of tolerance is where we can kind of begin to land out of habit, even through things, especially when things are difficult. So that is the window. And moving forward here, this is the self-check. Patience and calm thrive in certain conditions, most of which, thankfully, we can control. So experiencing and encountering the opposite isn't a problem. It's an opportunity to get curious. So when we're curious, we're more likely to slow down and in doing so respond. So a few points here, which you can come back to later. We fall into the habit of self-critical and reactive states, when we're stressed. So cultivating the gift of presence is the greatest thing we can do in our care partnering. And when we're in a reactive state, we're somewhere else, right? And understandably, again, that vigilance, we're somewhere ahead of ourselves or really caught up in the worry that something else will repeat itself. So frequently, just recognizing that we're caught in this is the awareness part that's essential to getting back to the window of tolerance. And to be practical about this, in the heat of a difficult care exchange, we run the risk of reacting and making matters worse, right? And we beat ourselves up and it gets to be problematic. Remaining present trains us to naturally de-escalate when we know we're headed somewhere else. And this way we're transforming interactions for the better. And we can be aware of this through the difficulty, and that's real confidence. So,
Laura, I'm seeing a comment and maybe
great.
this, a connection that perhaps we can make glaring to others, that when you started by asking us to, one, make ourselves a priority, followed by engaging in some patience and self-regulation and what have you, it seems as if you're also telling us doing those things increases our capacity to do this sort of self-regulating, not escalating, responding, not reacting kind of disposition that you're encouraging. So it's as if the other, where you started is what we need to attend to first, being ourselves, focusing on ourselves, which increases our ability to do what it is you're sharing right now.
Being at the trailhead and sort of knowing where we're headed with our intention.
Right.
It's very difficult to tolerate not knowing what's happening next. And yet we can trust our future self if we can trust ourselves here. So we can move through both difficulty and joy and find ourselves less likely to dwell in these stressful mind states, and then open up to what's really in front of us, right? We really can feel that. And even with significant challenges like dementia, the other person will respond. Their nervous system, their well-being is in tune with our own. So then caregiving is a wellness practice. And that's what's often misunderstood, not separate from our caregiving. And this has been a phenomenal lesson for me in my life and as I'm caregiving now. So the third essential practice here, and another question for you, if you're ready, and a reminder for a breath. Please describe a part of yourself that you like and miss about yourself right now, today, in this season. Describe a part of yourself that you really like and miss about yourself right now. And if you wish to deepen this a little, what are you grieving that largely goes unseen by others? What are you grieving that goes largely unseen by others? Thank you. We can go to the next slide. One more slide. That spiral, right? Grieving is integral to care partnering as a practice. So on the next slide here, this emphasis on where we're grieving, including grieving as an ongoing practice, as essential for self-care and well-being and connection. So on the next slide, there's no self-check. This is a time for self-compassion check-in. It's too important to not mention grieving as a process of well-being and self-care. And it's also too important to not delve deeper, but to give you the tools to at least turn towards looking at this, to say that grieving begins before, or if not at a diagnosis, any life-altering diagnosis. And at U of M, we've created programming to have conversations about this, living grief. And with my colleague Teresa, a program called Happy Enough Hour. Right, we need more spaces. So just want to elevate this and deepening the sustaining self-care that involves presence as a skill that is built over time, and grieving as a practice that is essential to your health and well-being. And while some relationships in your life may wobble and change, improve, or dissolve, the one you have with yourself does not need to plummet with caregiving. So thank you. I will pause there. I know there's great information coming forward. Thank you. Take good care of yourself in this hour.
Laura, that was very helpful. That was a perfect place to start. And what I'm seeing emerge that we will do throughout your presentations is as questions come up, I'm just going to interject and ask them to make sure that we get the opportunity to address questions that may come, but also it may stimulate additional information. Laura, rather, I apologize. Laura, you concluded by saying something that triggered probably one of the questions that has just come up. And this has been your focus on the self-care, which is all of our focus today. But the question is, what can someone do who's taking care of an elderly parent or even a special needs child, but it's taking a toll on their marriage? It's taking a toll on a relationship that matters so much, that they value so much, and perhaps is giving them some aspect of support in all of this. Any ideas or thoughts about where that person may begin?
It's a great place to begin, just to know and to be in conversation about what relationship is as it evolves, right? Even for those of us who've been married to the same partner for decades, right? That marriage is going to be many different marriages. So in just the same way we can honor the changes in ourselves and adapt to those learnings and growings, how we are able to recognize the change in marriage, and that will take two people to really turn towards and to make decisions. But lots of compassion for being right in the middle. It's so much. So being able to be in community with other people who are experiencing something similar and focusing on you is paramount.
Right, right. And I would say that we can't underestimate the power and the need to communicate and have conversations with that partner to just really begin to put out on the table, what does our investment in this relationship with each other really look like? And what does it really require of us? And so where does that take us going forward? But to be open in conversation about that, to not internalize what you see is a relationship or a marriage that you're getting the sense of is having concern or issue in that regard. So thank you. Thank you, Laura. Again, other participants, keep the questions coming. We're going to continue to roll here. I think Dr. Paula, you are on next. Am I correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. First of all, let me say thank you to AARP and to the planners of this event, and Dr. Gunnings-Moton in particular. This is a heartfelt conversation for me.
Yes.
It is one of those things that you almost cry when you hear someone say, let's take care or figure out how do we care for the caregivers. They are so important to the lives of so many people, the backbone, and in some ways, of our long-term healthcare system. And we're excited that you're here today. I had the privilege of taking care of my mom and dad, and I would change the slide. I want to introduce you to them. And every training I do, I identify my parents. Mom had Alzheimer's and dad had vascular dementia. And it was so important as we learned and grew about caring for them. And I thought I was smart. Let me be honest. I thought I was smart. I'm a psychologist. I know this stuff, right? No, I didn't know this in my head. I knew it in my head. But when you have it in your heart, it's a whole different experience for you. Mom got lost at Novi at the mall, and she lived in Ferndale. And in losing herself there, a kind, and I say thank you, God, for putting her in the hands of a kind person who called me and said, your mom's really upset. That was our first sign that mom's brain changes were getting worse. And they were married for over 60 years. And after mom passed, we brought dad into our home and recreated his room in our house so that we could help make the rest of this transition great. So as I change to the next slide, I want you to know that I kept a journal. And in keeping a journal, you're writing all this stuff down. It's your way of venting. It's your way of thinking you're creating these marvelous things. And so I wrote this journal and I opened it up and I started reading it. I was sad. I was angry. I didn't appreciate that I didn't have any help, which is a huge issue for many caregivers. And it seems like no one understood what it was I was going through. No matter how many words I said, no one seemed to truly understand. But what happened is that as a result of that, I came to a place where I'm going to use Laura's language. I learned to self-regulate. My language is I learned to manage me. I had these expectations that my parents, I was going to do this and it was going to be perfect. And I'd have dinner ready at 6 and I'd have breakfast ready at 8. And I was going to do all of that in addition to clean the house, do the yard, mow the grass, all of it. And the issue became, come on, Paula, let's be realistic. When I learned to manage my expectations, I became healthier in how I even engaged my parents. And as a result of this work, and sometimes people think that tough things you go through are just tough. Sometimes they're there to teach you and to move you forward. And so I started as a result. But before I tell you what I started, I want you all to know that as a result of my journey with my parents, I started a 501c3. And the 501c3 is called Universal Dementia Caregivers. But not only did I do that, I designed a training program for African-American caregivers that's evidence-based. And I wanted to say thank you to Dr. Peter Lichtenberg, who was one of the at Wayne State, because he was one of the first people who said, you got a good product here. You need to do something with it. So people are given to you for reason and season. So I thank him for doing that. And I wanted to say those things, and I targeted African-American caregivers for a reason. Because as we know, the mission here is to educate, I want to have real benefit. We want to be a trusted part, but we want to do mind, body, spirit, not just part of the person. They are whole people. And we want to bring the whole person into this experience. And African Americans in particular, just some stats for those, and I'm sure you know, dementia is 2 to 3 times more prevalent in the African American community. In addition to African American caregivers historically have been less informed, with less access to information, less access to resources. And if you're starting with a deficit in an area where you really don't know anything about, it just makes it that much tougher. So I decided that I would put this program together. And the other challenge we have sometimes with us is that family secrets are supposed to be family secrets. So often in the African American community, we don't tell you what our stuff is. We may tell each other, but we need to get to a place where we can be honest with each other, honest with ourselves, and share information so that we can get the resources necessary. So before I do, so that's our mission, but let me take a moment. I just want to celebrate the caregivers. And I think that's the next slide. I want to say, those of you that are sitting out there and you sit up all night because the baby's crying all night, or you sit up all night because mom won't go to bed and she has to go to the bathroom every 20 minutes. You're sitting up all night, and then when you have time to sleep, you're so tired you can't sleep. We want you to know we appreciate you. Everybody, we love you. If nobody told you today that they love you, know that we love what you're doing and your willingness to do it. Because I had a vision, I had a cartoon in my head once. I saw me getting up, getting my stuff and just leaving, closing the door, leaving my folks in there. You've had that moment. You've experienced that moment. But the beauty of it is you stayed and you're committed to the love and growth of the people that you're supporting, partnering with, and servicing. And one piece here just to tell you about, one of the things that I struggled with is when mom would start to cry. And she would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And I felt so helpless because I thought I was supposed to know how to fix it. What I came to learn is sometimes you just need to simply be present. Again, following Laura's model information, sometimes you just have to be at peace with yourself, to present peace to them, which is your energy with and around them, and allow yourselves to just hold hands, to love and touch, and we both fall asleep together, and we wake up the next day, and life is better. Because I got rid of this notion that I have to fix something. It was all about being present and in the moment and sharing and caring with our loved ones.
Paula, I think you've hit upon something there that is one of the questions that is prompted. I think a number of people were struck by how you and Laura both hit us on managing our expectations. And also you equated that, Paula, to us for how that makes you feel, or how that made you feel, rather, that you were healthier overall in that regard. Can you share anything more about what managing your expectations was like for you, or what that process was like for you in your role as a caregiver? How did you, what did that feel like, or what did that look like tangibly for you?
Well, let me start out. Waking up in the morning, I had this notion in my head that I could do everything. And because I realized that you can't do everything, I started this individual day and said, what can we accomplish now? What can we accomplish by another point? And if we accomplished it, great. But if we didn't, that was okay too. It gave myself permission to think that everything would be finished. There's no such thing as finished when you're engaging a loved one and you're growing together and you're learning together and you're moving forward together. So this notion of becoming healthier and managing my expectations, I also then was more able to be present with my loved one.
Yes.
I wasn't just off in the kitchen trying to fix dinner. I wasn't just here doing tasks.
Right.
Part of the role is loving on the loved one and them loving you back.
That's right.
And people think that someone with dementia can't love you back. Oh my God, they can love you back. You just need to learn their language. And I said, if I ever wrote a book, another one, I would write it on the love language of dementia.
Right.
Because there are many ways they tell us we love each other and that we care about each other. And I say, pay attention to the emotional stuff, because they don't forget that part of who you are.
Right. And I know for me personally, it was a lot of this self-talk that I had to remind myself to be patient with myself.
Yes.
See, my focus is often so much of how it is that I'm patient for the one and have patience for and with the one that I'm caretaking for. But we don't think about what it means to be patient with yourself sometimes.
Sonya, that's absolutely correct. But not only just adding patience, but being kind.
Yes, absolutely.
And what does being kind mean to you? It means whatever it means to you. If being kind to you is taking an ice cream and sitting on the front porch on a given time in your day, that's taking time to recognize that I am a human person who's doing a work that's not, there's no book that tells us how to do it, because every person living with dementia is one person living with dementia. And you can't just say they're all the same. So you have to be present with the person that you're serving.
Yes.
So that's very important. So as I looked at my next slide, I want you to know, though, caring for a loved one is not all doom and gloom. So we celebrate you, but we want you to know there's some special moments that come in this caring process, and no one has them except you. Mom told me once, she says, I don't know your name, but I love your spirit. And all I could do was just smile. That was the most wonderful gift. And I said, no one had that gift except me. And we would joke in the house and say, well, she's being nice today. Hold on to it, because she's going to cuss you out later. But you just expect it. As the disease grows, the behaviors change over time. And Barb, who's one of the caregivers that we support, and she supports us too, she said, I went into my mother's world and I finally understand where she is. I said, what a wonderful, wonderful gift. She said her mother was singing a jingle as she was being toileted. And she says, and I paused and said, I love you too. Because she was saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. She started her own song back. So what a gift to have that moment. So caregivers, even if you don't feel like it's a great day, there's another part of learning the things that Laura taught us, but also part of it being such that know that things will change. And we allow them to change. So the special moments. One story, let me tell you this, and this was really funny to me. Sometimes caregivers, we want them to feel like they know us. And so with people who have dementia, and I went to my dad once, I said, Dad, do you know my name? And he said to me, and he looked at me, he says, don't you know your own name? And all I could do was laugh. I said, there are moments that are just treasures that you can work through. Let me turn to the next slide. Underlying our work is this philosophy: honor who they were, love who they are, welcome who they become. In order to even put a plan in place of support and part of your care team, you need to know who your loved ones are, what was important to them, what is important to them, and honor it and make other people respect it too. And so as we then move to honoring, oftentimes we look backwards and say, what I didn't do right. Loving who they are is just in the moment, in the present time, loving who they are, the energies they bring, the challenges that you have for yourself, sharing and caring as you move forward, and then welcome who they become. Because as the brain continues to change and the disease progresses, they will continue to change. And I need to know that at all three levels of that, they're still the same person. I've heard too many people say, well, my mother's not the same. Well, neither are you then, if that's the case, because when you started, where you are and where we're going, they are the same person essentially in their heart, in their spirit. Stay connected to that. Look underneath the behavior, which is what I always tell people. Pay less attention to the behavior and more attention to what unmet need might not be being addressed or identified as you move forward with them. Let me change slides, please. So as a result of our nonprofit, these are some of the services we offer. And I'm just thrilled. I'm just thrilled to be able, I said, I was caring for my mother, and now I care for caregivers as I care for myself. So those are some of the services we offer. Let me talk in the next slide about boot camps. Our boot camp is probably the feature of our work. We try to create community. We try to create a place where people feel safe. People are willing to ask questions and share their vulnerabilities and no judgment, but also provide skills and tools that they can take home and utilize. I feel it a privilege that people allow us to do this work with them. The next slide is that we also do lunch and learns. And you see that there's food involved with everything. Well, part of the caring process in our communities is oftentimes surrounded with food. And so we provide great meals at each of these. Our donors have been wonderful in supporting us to do that. And so in our lunch and learns, our last lunch and learn was on dementia medications and how effective are they with African Americans. And it was a wonderful conversation. So they range from that in to dementia and sex. Talking about things that people find hard to talk about are the things we want to do. Following that, we also are, with the next slide, we also have family supports. Had a caregiver call us yesterday and she said she wants a family meeting. And in that family meeting, I need to tell my family they need to help me. And that was the energy she was putting off. I said, I think that's a really good thing to ask for help. I said, but we need to talk through how we ask for that. Because the challenge is you approach me the wrong way. I may say something I may regret later. Mm-hmm. So we need her. Part of the issue is she hates admitting that she needs help. We need to work through that piece. It's okay to need help. And even better when you actually reach out to someone and ask for help.
That comment, Paula, really ties to a question. There's two questions that have come up that I think are appropriately directed to both you, Paula, and you, Laura. And I think the questions or comments also are related. One is Timothy, who's saying, how can I make myself a priority when I have on call with my caregiver for, the question just left me, 24/7 caring for my loved one. And related to that, another participant says, my mother gets highly anxious if I leave the house, even for a short time. It's making me more and more isolated. What can I do? And so I'm hearing where you were just kind of going with that point, Paula, that you were making and thinking about something that Laura shared earlier. I made a note here about, in bold, put your support team in place. Now, I don't know why I wrote that, but put your support team in place. And I think it's first recognizing that regardless of your circumstances, there is a support team. Where we struggle is often recognizing what that support team may look like. But for all of us, there is a support team, and we need to be thoughtful and intentional about putting that support team in place. And as Paula was saying, knowing how it is that we approach members of our support team to help us engage in the roles and support that we may need them to play, even for brief amounts of time or whether it may be longer amounts of time. But I can tell you, in caregiving from my mother, when I can get my husband to say, you're going to be okay for lunch for 30 minutes or whatever the case may be, I need that. That gives me some reprieve. She doesn't need the 24/7, fortunately, but just having that 30 minutes of time is helpful. So I don't know if you all have any thoughts about how it is that people can put support teams in place, or how they can think about how they might manage things if they're caring for someone who gets really anxious if they leave them.
Laura, did you want to start with that? Or
I have so much to say about this. I also know that Dr. Sun is in the wings here.
Yeah, we've got time for him. I'm going to get to him and let him finish with his questions at the end.
Yeah, and so much compassion too for those of you in the audience who may be in complicated relationships. Like, there is so much love, and it's quite fortunate, and also very difficult, even when there's a lot of love. For those who are navigating relationships where it's difficult, we have to get very comfortable with our own personal set for where is enough. Mm-hmm. Where's enough? That would be the other question I'd ask you. But building that care team, as Dr. Gunnings was saying, we often need to look at resources and individuals who we may not have thought would be a part of our care team. There's a little grief in that. The relationships we may want to be, family members or friends, They might not have capacity, and there is a process there in finding new relationships and building those. It's so helpful to be in conversation with other care partners about how to do that.
Yes.
It's slow work, but it's powerful work, and I hope you will. There's lots of resources here for you.
And Laura, I think adding to that, honoring what people bring. Because I don't know how to sit up all night, or I can't go to the hospital, each of us brings something to the team. And we need to honor and respect that. But I also know at some point I'm not wasting any more time with some folks, because I only have limited time. I need to move on and find another resource. And I think our resources, we need to know what they are, do some testing of them to see if we're comfortable with them, and then decide if they're part of the team. The last thing I'll say as we move to the final presentation is that caregivers, please know you are not alone. Even though we think we're alone, we feel like we're by ourselves, you are not alone. And there are so many more resources available now than there used to be. And we need to access those. We need to take some risk sometimes and step out and test some of these resources to see if they're real for us. Always build on the relationship that you have with your loved one or your loved ones, because building that relationship touches your heart, touches your spirit, but also touches their heart. And something about being kind to other people and being kind to yourself, you can't help but receive gifts of kindness. And then the last thing, which both Laura and I said, you are the first priority. You are the first priority. Your loved one cannot exist. Now, let me not say that. They can exist. They won't exist at the level of care and the right level of handling that are necessary, because you are essential to their success. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you very much. And that is all a good segue to Dr. Sun, who, when we talk about resources and support, challenged my thinking about how I think about that differently. So, Dr. Sun, we're going to let you take it away and share with us some of your insight and knowledge.
Sure. Thank you, Sonya. Let me see how can I bring up the slides. Okay, it's there. First of all, I'd like to thank AARP Michigan for inviting me to join those two experienced and smart two other speakers on this panel. Also thank Sonya for moderating this session. Thank you for your introduction. When you mentioned, I did my health and aging policyship fellowship, I was actually did with AARP in Washington, D.C. So my connection with AARP is way back. I did it with the Department of Global Council of Brain Health in D.C. with the AARP's headquarters. But my deep connection with AARP is I'm a member of AARP myself. I'm in my 40s. Sonya said, I'm not joining AARP just for those travel perks. It's more about those education opportunities like those things, like this. It's not just those information knowledge, but also it helps form the community, forms a connection among us. Like Paula mentioned, we are not alone. So my thanks also goes to all the caregivers who joined this session right now. I know some of you are from Michigan. Actually, I'm in a small town, Michigan. If you're familiar with Michigan, I'm in the Pinky area. I know Michael, you're from Heartland. I'm most close to you. I'm in Blair, Antrim County. So greetings from Michigan to caregivers in other states. So what I'm going to focus on is some technology tools that you may find useful during your caregiving situations. Like Laura, I also like to ask you questions. I like to get you think, or rethink, let's keep our healthy brain. So what are some positive sides of caregiving? I hope you can write down in the chat box, just a couple of words, if you have never thought about it. But what are some positive sides of being a family caregiver? Like Paula hinted on in her talk, what are some cherished moments that you found between you and your care recipient? So you can take the time, write down in the comments section. But here, next slide, I can control. Good. So here are some example answers from caregivers when I did my community talk. You may find some of them resonate with you. People will tell me, okay, taking care of mom helped me get to know more about mother. I found I learned something new. Now I know how to get her to the shower. Even she, at first she resisted. So you may find some other things that have not been shown on this slide. great. I saw some people mention you have the time to spend with your mom. And some people will share, they feel the warmness and from the kindness of the strangers on the street or from the society's friendliness towards the care recipient. So those are the little precious things that they have never found, before we become a caregiver. So with this thought, holding this thought, my focus is focused on what are some technology tools that are available to help us to better perform our caregiving duties or help us to engage in more better self-care. And the last question is, what are some best technologies tools? So if you are using some of the technology tools, feel free to share in the chat box. So overall, the technology tools, you probably are using them in your daily life. They can be used, to monitor the house safety, assist with physical, mental, or psychosocial needs of the care recipient. You can also use those tools to help caregivers, help yourselves, get information, acquire skills training, or get peer emotional support, etc. So I'm going to introduce two tools that we use in our lab. The first tool is we use for person living with dementia. One common situation that we found the person with dementia, they tend to withdraw. They don't have many meaningful social engagement activities. So in the home setting, how can we get those people more engaged, provide more meaningful and cognitively stimulating activities? So the first tool is called Remember Stuff. So it provides articles from the old times, from the 40s, 60s, 50s, also games and art studios and puzzles in different formats, could be in audio or video formats, and then get the person with cognitive impairment or the care recipient to engage in those activities. Those activities are geared toward their their preference and interest and very easy to use. So this is a quick a demonstration of the platform. This is the puzzle and this art studio. So they can use, based on their remaining capacity, they can use whatever ways to engage in those activities to building moments of joy and building new connections with the caregiver. The second tool I'm going to use is for the caregivers. It's called Chuata. It's an online platform that provides information, skills training, and also moderates Q&A sessions for caregivers. So it has three components. So the platform looks like this. You have access to it through your computer. And the first platform is a library. The library is geared towards the caregiver's needs, based on the situation of the care recipient you take care of. Could be person with dementia or people with stroke or diabetes or Parkinson. And then depending on the different needs, there are some core competencies for caregivers to grow. In terms of, responding to different behaviors, managing the medications, home safety. So for whatever component you chose, it will link you to the videos and audios and the educational components on those topics. The second component is a place where you can raise a question to a moderator who is a nurse practitioner. So they will answer questions raised by caregivers. And the last piece is online seminars, is monthly seminars on different topics for caregivers. For each agency, they will also upload some local resources. So for example, in Michigan, we have 6 AAAs that are using this platform. So if you are living in the East Lansing area or in the Region 9 area, you can feel free to sign up through us. But I notice caregivers are from different states here. So if you are living in the 36 states in the United States, like the deep blue colors, those 36 states, they all have Chuata, mostly through the AAAs, and it's free to the caregivers.
Okay, Faye, I'm hearing people. Is there a way that we can capture what you have just shared with us? If we can go back to that previous slide, because the immediate question seems to be, how can I get this? Is this available? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm hearing you say that if they access these particular sites, then...
So this is, sorry for this one.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. And I just want to know if the ARP can provide that for us so it stays with participants.
So this is only for Michigan specific in our catchment area. But if you Google, if you type in Chuata and type in your county's name or your zip code, and
Okay.
see whether your AAAs, your area agencies on aging, has subscribed to it.
Gotcha.
Like California, New York, I
Yes.
know for sure they have it, but you have to type in, your county's name and put down Chihuahua and see whether your county, has a
Okay.
subscription.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If Another perk is if you are from Asian or Latino background, you can sign up through us because we notice most of the Chihuahua are based on geographic regions. So the MSU Chihuahua also highlight some specific needs for the immigrants like the Asian backgrounds or the Latino backgrounds. So we have different language versions through the MSU side. So if you are from different states but you are fall within the category of Asians or Latinos, you can sign up through us as well. Okay, the last tool I want to introduce is AI or artificial intelligence based like robots. You may heard of robots a lot of times. So this one is called Able. I'm not going to elaborate it, but this is a story from our caregivers. His name is Gary. He's taking care of his wife, Marine. So they use the Able to engage Marine. Marine actually, they allowed us to share her story. Marine is actually at a very late stage of dementia. A lot of times she's not able to communicate. Her language capacity has lost, but she's still able to interact with this little dog. And also building connections. The dog can wake her up and can engage her in some activities. Also building the connections with the husband and the wife. If you have more questions about this robot, Gary allows me to share his information here. He is also a caregiver. He can definitely relate to Tim's question about, I'm 24/7 in the house taking care of my wife. How can I get self-care? How can I put myself on the top priority? But Gary, because of the Apple, because she put on her teams together, he is able to get some respite care. He's also going to manage to come to our educational sessions or join our conferences. So reach out to him. He probably will welcome a message from also a peer caregiver across the other side of this state or across the other side of the country. Okay, the last piece, if you want to know more information about technology, we have a local conference on May 17th in a small town in Michigan. It's called Sandish. This is our flyer. I know I lost the problem in the end, but thank you for your attention. Sonya, I'm turning over to you.
Well, you all disappeared on my screen for a moment there.
Oh,
So
I'm in a
I
rural
don't know
area,
what's
so
going
I have to tell you the technology is really unstable.
I thought, what has Faye done to the technology over here in the midst of this whole conversation? But thank you so much. I am seeing a lot of inquiries as well as requests for follow-up. So a couple of things I think we can do, and I'm speaking to AARP here, that will be helpful. Laura, Paula, I see a request for information that we can provide about support groups. And so that's a good thing, people. That's telling us that is a good thing. So right now, links are being shared directly in comments, if I'm reading this correctly, that you may access. And perhaps AARP, it's also possible we're sharing Laura's presentation and a few of the other presentations, as well as some of the resource links. Maybe we can get that to them, not only here, but also via, I think someone said about email or whatever that case may be. But by email, yes, they're confirming as I'm speaking. So we're going to get that information to you via email and allow you to sort through it, absorb it, and use it in a way that is helpful to you in building your own support and resources in that regard. And I'm also hearing that,
Sonya, I just
yes,
question
go ahead,
to
Faye.
buy robots. So I think I list the third question I didn't answer. What's the best technology tools? I want to
Yes.
emphasize the technology that's accessible to you, that you feel comfortable using it, that you will use it the most often, are the most best technology you can use. So the Apple I introduced in the last is from Sony company. It's quite expensive. It's like $1,500, close to $2,000 a piece. But you can buy substitutes like this baby doll pack. It can also suit, people with later stage of dementia, but
Okay.
it's less, it's more affordable. You can get it from Amazon. It's only 20 some dollars. So find the best technology that is affordable, accessible, and they will use often. I would think that's the best technology for you.
Great. Okay. Well, listen, presenters, thank you so much. And please, I know everyone is joining me in thanking you. This was tremendously helpful, a wealth of information, and you're going to be getting an email follow-up that's going to give you some of what was shared today. Next Thursday, March 21st, we will continue this series with a program on sex at 50 plus. We're going to get down and real with modern day tips, warnings for dating apps, meeting people, advice on how you can engage with and address the impact of aging and prescription drugs. The link to register is in the chat, or you can use the QR code that is appearing on the screen. So thank you to our guests. Thank you to AARP, and we look forward to seeing you next week.